All right, the hour is upon us. Thank you all for coming today. At this time, I'd like to call our meeting to order. I will offer an invocation also at this time if you'd like to bow your head. Our most gracious Heavenly Father, we come here before you again today. We know that before you ask, you know what our needs are, what our wants, but yet we're so quick to neglect so many times to seek your will first, what you would have us to do. And we follow so many pathways that lead us to unfulfilled wishes and promises. We pray, Lord, for our community. We give you thanks for there being no injuries in the robbery at a local business today. We also ask for your peace, your grace, and your comfort for one family amongst us that has lost a loved one. We lift all these things up in your name. Amen.
Amen.
So this is a call meeting today, and the item of consideration is a resolution authorizing the acceptance of the final high offer in the sale of the Roanoke Rapids Theater. And to take us into that order of business, I would call on the City Attorney, Mr. Jeffrey Davis, at this time.
So, I know we were just here last week, and I know everyone on council is familiar with kind of how we kind of get to here, but just to kind of go back through that, we, back at the end of May, council voted under 160A-269 to propose to accept an offer to purchase the Roanoke Rapids Theater by Wellman and White for $1.5 million. And as we discussed, what that process does under the statute is a piece of property like that, a piece of real property, has under that, when it's sold under that statute, or council proposes to accept a sale under that statute, it has to be advertised for upset bids. We went through that process. There were several rounds of upset bids. The last round concluded last Tuesday at 4 p.m. Throughout this, there have been two interested parties. I'll characterize it as that way, that have been submitting bids back and forth. That would be on the one hand, Wellman and White on behalf of their group of bidders, and then the Victor Enterprises would be the other party. And so at the end of all of that process, at 4 o'clock, the bids were opened. There was a check from Mr. Freeman on behalf of Victor Enterprises, but there was no bid enclosed with that. And I think we kind of went through that back and forth quite in depth last time. I know the question was asked of me, and I said that I don't feel comfortable accepting that as a valid upset bid because the amount of the bid is not in there. We just have a check for a deposit. You can do that math. You can do the algebra and I guess presume what the bid would be, but I'm not sure, and I don't feel comfortable saying that council can do that. And I certainly don't think that the other party, in this case Mr. Wellman and White, on behalf of their group, would be satisfied with that result. And so what I suggested to council is that we come back. At that time there wasn't a special meeting scheduled, but we did at least discuss that possibility, that we come back at some later meeting, whether that was the August 1st meeting next week or at a special meeting, which is what we're here for today, and consider a resolution to approve a final sale. That is what is before City Council today, and that is what we have prepared. And so, and that's what the special meeting notice is for, is to consider a resolution authorizing acceptance of a final offer in the sale of the Roanoke Rapids Theater. If council approves this, What this document does is allows city personnel to execute the contracts necessary to effect a real estate sale. It would not come back before council at that point. If council rejects this, then I have some advice. I don't think that council is suddenly going to want to keep the Roanoke Rapids Theater and maintain that. I think that I've had a sense that certainly during my tenure as city attorney, the position of the city council is that the city needs to get out of the theater business and to sell that piece of property. And so if council rejects this resolution, then I have some suggestions that I'm going to get into in a second for where we go from here. And I'll have some suggestions as far as things that I don't think that the city needs to do. Just going through the resolution before we kind of move on from there, you'll notice that there is I would say, if you're focusing on one specific part, the second page are the maybe critical conditions, so to speak, to kind of think about, and as far as answering some of maybe the procedural questions as far as a closing. Section 2, the closing will occur within 30 days after the adoption of the resolution and completion of a title examination confirming that title is satisfactory to the buyer, whichever is later. Section 3, proof of funds will be delivered to the seller within 5 business days of request of proof of funds. And so then Section 4, the buyer must pay the balance of funds with cash at the time of closing. I think those are the kind of critical kind of procedural things that may answer some questions about if council does choose to accept the resolution. So let's kind of talk about if council chooses not to accept the resolution. And I know that there is several council members expressed skepticism at the position that I took that the check that we received was not a valid upset bid. I still feel that way, and what I would suggest to council that I would not suggest to council to do this. If council, I think the first gateway is to kind of consider other options, as council would have to reject the approval of this resolution. What I would advise council not to do is not to make a motion recognizing the Mr. Freeman's check as an upset bid. I will say after the 4 p.m. deadline, after I think that the Victor Enterprises realized that there was some issue, they did send an email to the city manager informing them of their bid amount. But that email came in after the conclusion of 4 p.m. And so because of those kind of questions about its defectiveness, I would say that council should not just consider a motion to recognize that as a valid upset bid and restart that process. Instead, if council wanted to follow that and wanted to pursue essentially that bid and that offer, what I would advise council to do is to formally reject all bids, because you always have the authority to do that under 160A-269, something that we've talked about many times, is that at the end of everything, council always has the authority, or even during the process, council can reject any and all bids. And so what that does is that basically presses a reset button, that presses pause. And from there, council, everything would be kind of reset to zero, and we kind of go back to the original 3 options that we discussed regarding disposition of real property such as this. That is, the process that we have here. Council could accept Mr. Freeman's offer and under 160A-269, and that would trigger a new process of upset bids. Again, the gateway for all this is I think there would need to be a formal rejection of all offers. And I think that's just to kind of keep it clear, and that's to communicate too, in that context, to Wellman and White, that we are formally restarting this process, a power that we clearly have the ability to do, rather than the kind of open question regarding, or what I feel like isn't an open question, but the issue as far as trying to recognize and upset bid that there are some defects with. 2, if council were to reject all bids, you could always use the other 2 alternatives that we've discussed throughout this. Council could, as we did last year, put the theater out for bids. We'd have to notice that for the 30-day period. And as we did in the past, council would receive bids that then would come before council, and council would consider them and accept or reject the highest qualifying bid. The third option, of course, is the electronic auction could be resumed. We would have to notice that for 30 days, and then at which point the auction would begin. As far as the details of that, you could do it for a short time window, you could do it for a long time frame. Again, that's in council's discretion. For any of those options, though, and I want to be clear when I'm saying this, is the only decision that council would need to make today is accepting or rejecting this offer from Wellman and White, okay? Because that's what's on the special meeting notice. And so in that process, I suspect there's going to be some communication to city personnel, myself and the city manager, about if it is a rejection as far as where council wants to go. And so, based on whatever that feedback is, we would have a new proposal for city council at the next meeting, whether that's a resolution as far as Mr. Freeman's offer, accepting that and kind of restarting the upset bid process, or whether that's one of those other 2 options that we've discussed. I will say too, and I'm kind of coming to the end of everything, and I know council probably has some questions. The Victor Enterprises has hired Mitchell Armbruster, who is here, on behalf of his client. I know at a previous meeting we gave Mr. White ample opportunity to speak on behalf of his clients, and so I would suggest to council that council, even though we don't have a public comment section scheduled here, I would suggest that we give him an opportunity to kind of speak and kind of let council know his client's feelings on these matters. I think that's appropriate, and I think it's fair to both sides in all of this. So I would ask council to allow him to do that, and then at that point we can kind of come back for questions and other comments.
Okay, we would recognize you to come and speak. If you'd like to come to the podium, please. If you would, state your name again.
Sure, I'm Mitch Armbruster. Thank you for letting me speak tonight. Again, I'm Mitch Armbruster. I'm with the Wake County Bar and the Smith Anderson Law Firm in Raleigh, where I've practiced for the last 20 years. My practice focuses on a lot of government contract litigation. I represent some public bodies. I largely represent contractors, too, with the state government. I appreciate the opportunity to talk to you tonight. I've been retained as North Carolina counsel by the Victor Enterprises, and you may know, you may have received a letter from their Blank Rome, which is their national counsel, containing some of their objections to the rejection of their prior offer. And I know that the purpose of the meeting here tonight is limited, but obviously the Victor Enterprises believes clearly that the City Council should reject the resolution that's before you, because that's only before you because their bid that they submitted on July 18th was rejected. I know there were some issues taken with the bid, but in these processes, it's often the case that there's some imperfections in a bid. The point of the statute that we're talking about here is to maximize the value that you can get for your city on the sale of this important property. You have an offer in this resolution before you to sell the property for $2 million, and you have had it confirmed by Mr. Freeman that their offer is for $2,350,000, which is a significant increase of over 17% on the prior offer. That's a significant amount of money for the city, for retiring your debt service, and for serving the purpose of the statute, albeit if the bid is imperfect or not. By rejecting the resolution to accept the $2 million bid, you could move forward, as Mr. Davis just went through, not at this meeting, but at a next meeting. You could go ahead and accept that offer and restart the upset bid process, and perhaps the offer could even go higher than if there's more upset bids, you could even get more for this property. And so that's, I think it would be premature to stop the process at that time. I do think also that, we can look at the bid that they submitted last week. It did have the check in it. It did say upset bid on the document. I think that could have been accepted as a valid bid. And that's not what was chosen to do at the last meeting, but I certainly thought that could have been done with that bid. Because you look, if you were trying to sell a house and you got an offer for $200,000, and then you got another offer to sell your house for $235,000, right? But there was some minor imperfection. You would seek a clarification because you would rather sell your house for the extra $35,000 because that's money to put your kids to college or all these other things. You'd rather try to clarify and work out the imperfections. So by rejecting the resolution tonight, you would allow the process to go forward, to allow the city to get the benefit of the higher bids and allow you to maximize your recovery for the city. And I think that would be also in keeping with the way I've seen, and I've just been retained a couple days ago, but there's been a lot of articles written about this process, a lot of interest, as you know. And I've seen that the City Council has made efforts before, laudably, to try to be flexible during the process. When Wellman and White submitted an offer earlier on and they didn't have their check with it, you allowed them to submit their check later. And then there was an issue with the advertising of bids. And I think it would be unfair and arbitrary to not allow the same flexibility to happen in regards to Mr. Freeman's bid. And you can do that by rejecting the resolution tonight instead of just leaving money on the table. I think that would be in the best interest of the city. I'm happy to answer any questions you have, but I agree with Mr. Davis that this is a special meeting, so you can't, I don't think in this meeting you could reject the resolution plus accept Mr. Freeman's bid. Since it's a special meeting and it's limited to this resolution, I'm urging you to reject that resolution. So that would leave you free at your next meeting to go ahead and accept Mr. Freeman's bid and let the bid process continue. I'm happy to address any questions you have. I really appreciate the opportunity to speak to you tonight.
All right. We have questions from the council for Mr. Ambridger.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Mayor, I don't have any questions for him, but I got a question for our attorney.
Sir.
Okay, we recognize Mr. Smith.
At what meeting did we authorize Mr. White to bring in the check the following morning?
What I think the references to is that with their original offer, my reading of 160A-269 is that you don't necessarily have to make the offer and have the deposit amount with it at the same time you initially make that offer, because when you first make the offer, traditionally it hasn't come before council at all. So there's really nothing to deposit until council provisionally proposes to accept the initial offer. And so I think that's what the reference is being made to, because during any upset bid, when we've been going through that process, as I feel the statute requires, any upset bid has been accompanied by a check. for the deposit amount in the statutory amount. So I think that's what the reference is
Okay.
to.
If I were re-elect, I think originally when Mr. Freeman put in his offer, did we not give him until a certain date to bring in the check, and then it expired, and then later he brought the check in even later?
Yes, originally, we, and city clerk has conveniently handed me a timeline.
I believe that was in the first
Yes.
offer that he made.
Yes, and so we accepted back on May 22nd, we accepted the Victor Enterprises' original proposal for $1.75 million. There was at that point, before we could start the upset bid process, we had to receive the deposit from Victor Enterprises after we communicated to them that their offer had been accepted, and their offer was communicated kind of at the last minute. I think we got it maybe 3 o'clock on the day that it was considered, because we had already had a meeting scheduled and had already noticed that we were going to discuss an offer from Wellman & White for $1.5 million. And so that offer came in, and the special meeting notice was much broader in that case, and so it allowed it to be considered, and council did accept that offer. The ultimate and so pursuant to that, of course, I got in touch with Mr. Freeman and indicated, hey, we need to go ahead and get the deposit check in so we can start this process, because council really does want to go ahead and get some certainty as far as getting the theater sold. And so I gave him kind of a tentative deadline, and I communicated throughout. I said, at some point we are going to, council doesn't meet again for another 2 weeks. And at that meeting, if the deposit had not been received by that point, council could vote to reject all bids. And I indicated to him that I felt that council would have some skepticism, given the impulse to go ahead and get some movement on this. And so he did make several guarantees to me. He did have an attorney for a brief period during that point. And ultimately, that wasn't paid, so we came back in on June 6th at our regular meeting. Council was informed that deposit had not been submitted, and Wellman & White essentially resubmitted their proposal for $1.5 million. So council rescinded the resolution 2023.05, which was the initial acceptance of the Victor Enterprises offer, and then adopted a new resolution under the number 2023-09 for Wellman & White's offer, which is what has initiated this whole process here. So that's a lot of words to basically say, yes, we gave him a period to pay the deposit. That deposit wasn't paid in that period, and then council exercised its ability that, as I said, it always has until it passes the final motion accepting the sale after the upset bid process. Council exercised its authority to reject all offers and start the process again.
Okay, well, in your opinion, I've got an opinion on that. We've been honest with we've treated both parties the same way then. If we excuse one, we excuse the other for the check the next day. As far as the initial deposit, yes. Right, as far as
Yes.
deposit is concerned.
Yes, correct. You're talking about the initial deposit before the upset bids. Like I say, my position is under 168-269, which again, and I know everybody's probably tired of hearing me rattle off those numbers, but under that process, to submit, when you get into the upset bid period, to submit a valid upset bid, you have to have that deposit check in there.
Right.
It's not something that you can then submit that later.
Okay. Well, the reason I asked that question is because it was only brought up about one party instead of both parties doing the same thing. So I want a clarification to make sure that we understood that we leaned over backwards for both parties. We didn't just tried to interfere with one party.
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Mayor, I do have a few questions that I would like to address to the attorney as well as the city manager,
Okay.
and or maybe make a comment or two. And I know indicated earlier that we have received an email from the Freeman Group on the 18th. And that email was indicating the dollar amount, the bid amount, and the whole 9 yards, because it did you say earlier, I don't know if you said it, that it sounded like he was in question that the bid was a good bid? Oh, what? You received an email on the 18th.
Yeah, so we had our bid
what was
opening at 4 p.m. on the 18th, and that's when we opened it. A check was enclosed.
And what was the indication on that email? What was
the email that I received, which I did not receive until after later the evening on the 18th, but at 4:53 p.m. on Tuesday, July 18th, I received an email from Victor Freeman that stated that on behalf of the Victor Enterprises, please accept my bid offer of $2,350,000 and my 5% deposit of $117,500 for the upset bid for the Roanoke Rapids Theater. But that was after the upset bid period had closed at 4 p.m.
But we had received the check on the what date did we receive that?
Well, the sealed envelope was dropped off on July the 10th,
July 10th.
but under the sealed bid, we were keeping them sealed until the end of the deadline, the upset bid period deadline, and then shortly after 4:00 p.m. on the 18th, they were opened.
And in the 160 whatever, I hear you repeating on. Is there
I hear it in my sleep. So
I know.
don't worry
Is there a definite requirement that a dollar value for the bid amount have to be in that?
I don't really care for the wording of 168-269. I think it could be clearer in many respects. But my reading of it and my legal opinion of it is that I don't feel that just a mere deposit check qualifies as a valid upset bid.
Right.
I think there are questions with that.
Right. And now I'd like to make a general statement, comment if I can. I know that we're here to do what's best for the city. I know that we're looking at this big deck that we have. We have nobody interested, then everybody interested, which at this point, that's a good thing, I think, in some cases. But with the 7.6 million out there, I think for our citizens, one of the things that we do and what the statute, I believe, indicates is that we try to get the highest amount of monies for this product. And generally stating, I know that we feel, some feel, or we feel that, if it's local, that they know what we want and can do possibly a better job of making it happen. But that's not what we're talking about, the building around the theater at this point. We're talking about the theater itself, and getting the most money for the buck is, I think, where we really are trying to do. There's been so much ambiguity here in this process that no matter what way we look at it at one point, I think neither of the parties are going to be happy. It appears that one party has hired someone to look at this, and I know that the other party already has someone on that side that's looking at this. So no matter what way we go in a selection as it currently is would satisfy that. I don't want to pay Jeffrey dollars to defend us out there, and I know we, so we've got a $250,000 offer, more than what is out there on the books. From a citizen's standpoint, that's a good thing. And if we if we can look at it so that we don't have to worry about Jeffrey defending us, or Mr. Brewster defending the other party, or whatever the case may be, I think that would be a kind of a halfway win-win for us. I would like, and I'm not making a motion at this point, but I would like to see us reject all these bids and start from anew, not within a 30-day period, but somehow so that we can move forward with this process, not having to wait 30 days. And I think I heard a way you indicating a way that we could do that, of continuing this process. And then starting anew would indicate, hey, look, no party at this point is out. No party at this point has an advantage over the other party, and everybody's starting anew. Well, the other party is not having to wait the 30 days, and you indicated a way I believe we could do that. But that's kind of how I'm thinking right now. But at the same time, with so much confusion and ambiguity, I would like to see the city manager develop within that time frame a form that's a fill in the blank, and we won't have to worry about this anymore. And with the amount, the dollar amount, the percentage of whatever the case may be, and when it comes to us, it's cut and dry. So that to me is where I want us to go. I'm not. I know the first part would be to reject this part, which, that's my thinking, but I think that would put us all on the same page, at the same level, without us fighting one side on the other. So that's kind of where I am, where I'd like to see us go. And I will reserve my other thoughts a little bit later on.
Ms. Bryan, Mr. Steinbeck? Ms. Bryan?
I'm trying to soak it all in. I realized when we met on the 18th that the bids had been open. The bid was opened at 4. Apparently, we're just finding out that at 4:53 the email came through that specified the information that was said was missing. I looked up 168-269, printed it out, and I read it, and it just says, when a bid is raised, the bidder shall deposit with the city clerk 5% of the increased bid, and the clerk shall re-advertise the offer at the increased bid. Now, that's the statute. It doesn't say anything about any information with it. So I don't think we have a choice. In my opinion, the statute doesn't state that it had to be written or specified what it was, the amount that it was for. The check was submitted. It was submitted with upset bid on the envelope, and I still think we have to consider it. And I think on one of the prior, they were talking about checks coming in and not being in on time. I seem to remember the Freeman contacting the attorney, I think, and the city manager saying that there was some issue with the check being electronically submitted by the date that we had asked, but it was maybe received the very next day, and we had voted to not accept it. Am I correct?
I don't believe we ever received anything that first kind of what I would call the kind of aborted round with that first resolution of the acceptance of the 1.75. It seemed to me, and I in fairness to the parties, again, they were negotiations that happened with me. It seemed like that Mr. Freeman was maybe having some difficulty getting the money moved around so he could get a certified check to us. But I think that I don't think we ever actually received a check from him before council rejected that offer and kind of started the process over again.
Okay. I
And-
just wanted clarification.
And just to kind of answer your question on 160A-269, I think the part that I would point out, and it's the exact same sentence that you read, I think that first clause, when a bid is raised, carries a lot of weight for me in that. Because that's the condition. When the bid is raised, the bidder shall deposit. So you have to raise the bid, and I think there has to be some communication doing that, because, like I say, we can do the math backwards to get to what the assumed bid is. But someone doesn't have to pay a deposit. That's just the minimum deposit. You know, somebody could come in, and if they wanted to bid $2 million, they could submit the deposit for $2 million. And I could see a scenario, if you got the money, showing, good faith, or there could be all kinds of reasons why someone, I guess, would want to do that if they wanted to tie up their money that way. So you can submit something beyond the minimum, and it gets, I think it kind of gets outside of the discretion of the clerk or the city manager or even the city attorney to go back and kind of do that math in reverse to say, okay, this is what their bid was. And that's one of the reasons why I say I don't think there's any scenario where council should, for instance, pass a motion and say we're just going to accept this bid and say that this is a valid upset bid and keep the process going on. I think there needs to be a clear demarcation. And so that if council does not approve the sale here, whether it's for that reason or for any other reason, if council doesn't approve the sale, then I think it needs to reject all bids. And then we come back and essentially restart the process just like we've done before. And just to be clear, the 30 days only comes in when you're doing an electronic auction or when you're soliciting bids. You could always accept a bid that you've already got, or tomorrow or this evening. After rejection, a new bid could be submitted, or a new offer, I guess is probably a better way to say it. A new offer could be submitted, and council could consider that under the same 168-269, and they could do that. You could do that at the next meeting, and then immediately once the deposit is received, and once the city has opportunity to properly notice it in the local paper, and we'd run the 10-day notice period, then we go back into the same familiar process that we've been in for the past, roughly month and a half. So.
Mr. Mayor, I think everybody's had the opportunity to speak.
Let me ask one more question of the city attorney. So if there was a new bid process, it could start over at whatever the first bid was that came in. Wouldn't have to start where we are now.
Essentially what you're doing is you're treating it as a new offer. Yes. So if that answers your question.
Well,
so,
I guess to put it in numbers, somebody could submit a bid for $1 million. $1 million on a new process.
They could.
Rejected all bids.
I kind of doubt that after all this, and we're up to $2 million, I kind of doubt that council would consider that, honestly. But yes, I kind of think both of these parties seem to be communicating to us, and I would hope they're both acting in good faith, that they have this money available and are ready to spend it if it goes to them. And so I doubt that they would come back in and submit something lower than where they are now. That seems like that would cause some problems.
Down that same line, Mayor, if I may. If we reject all the bids and start the process over, could we not name an amount, a starting amount?
You could, and certainly if we started the process over, there would be a new resolution that would come before council.
Mm-hmm.
And just as we've kind of discussed, council could, in that resolution, put some conditions.
2.35 million as a start.
You could, well, they would have, the offer would already be out there, so you'd essentially be proposing to accept that offer pursuant to some conditions.
We're rejecting all offers, but if
Yes.
we start the process over, could we start that process over and indicate that we want to restart the process, have the city manager do a form within that time frame, start the bid at $2.3 million, and you have a 10-day upset period.
I think it's kind of, and we're kind of getting into real technical things. I think what would happen is there would have to be a new offer out there, or accepting an old offer where it's at, whether that's accepting Mr. Freeman's offer that he tendered after 4 o'clock last Tuesday of 2.3. Council could accept that in a new resolution, and then that would start the process. And so then that would set the floor essentially in that fashion. And I want to kind of, like I say, I'm kind of focusing on that technicality, because when you're talking about okay, we're going to accept proposals, you're really talking about more one of the other processes that we've talked about that the city has actually tried to go through before, which is soliciting bids. And that's where we kind of publish out within 30 days and say, hey, the city is accepting bids for this piece of property, and the minimum bid that we will accept is, for instance, $2 million or something to that effect. And so everybody get your bids in. This is what it is. That's more where you're kind of setting the floor. In this process, if we're talking under doing something just like the process we've been in, the floor is set by the first offer that you accept.
And there is an offer out there. We're just not accepting it at this point. We're rejecting all offers, but then with a new resolution, we'd go back and accept it.
My suggestion to the parties to kind of make things simple for themselves and for us would be, if council did reject all offers, would be for them to resubmit. And then council would have something before it so that it could accept or reject. And I will say, this has been you kind of made reference to having some forms for upset bids. This is not something, a piece of property like this, that the city of Roanoke Rapids does very often,
Right.
to say the least.
But
And so it is, just like any kind of new experience, it is a learning experience. And, certainly, if council did reject all bids, and then there was a new offer and a new resolution, there may need to be some discussion about the different kind of aspects of that, what's in that resolution.
So the one thing just listening at the mayor and others, the one thing I didn't want to see happen is that, of course, didn't want to do the 30-day, didn't want to start the 1 million process. So we needed some way of starting it at least at the offer that's there, and it sounded like you gave a solution to that, reject all the bids, and then do an acceptance of the other bid at the 2.3. But
Which you could maybe do the first part today, but you certainly couldn't do the
right,
second part.
understand that. But again, didn't want, and it sounded like we didn't have to give the 30-day. Once we did a resolution, it will be the 10-day process would start from that. Makes sense to me. I would like to make a motion if.
Mr. Mayor,
Are there any more questions?
I'd like to be recognized, Mr. Mayor.
Chair recognizes Councilman Smith.
Okay. Mr. Mayor, I've got concerns about Freeman's ability to complete this sale. The reason I'm stating that, he's had some issues with some building and welding. He's had an issue of getting a deposit in the beginning of all this process. And unprofessional way that he's been handling all the way through this process. I think the city needs to go ahead and have this issue settled. And if you're ready for a motion, Mr. Mayor, then I'll be glad to put a motion on the table.
Mr. Mayor,
Mr. Mayor, at
Question.
the time, I've got the floor, Mr. Mayor.
I've got his
I asked a question of the mayor.
question.
We in Robert's Rules of Order. Mr. Smith has the floor.
He's got the floor, but I have a question.
I think he said that he wants to make a motion, so I think he can make a motion and see if we have a second, and then you can ask for more discussion.
Okay, we'll do that. All right, we shall hear Mr. Smith.
You ready for the motion?
Mr. Smith.
All right, Mr. Mayor, I'd like to make the motion that we accept resolution number 2023.12.
Okay, we have a motion on the floor. Do we hear a second to the motion?
I'll second that, Mr. Mayor.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Now, at this time, do we have any additional discussion?
Yeah, and I guess I'm going back to history. And some history, I guess, is relating to a former person that was trying to buy the theater that probably gave us millions of dollars, paying us $58,000 a month, and we had that same question. And I don't think we'll be here now if we didn't do the same thing we're doing right now, trying to bypass that. And it's unfortunate, I think, that we're doing that. But again, I'm finished at that. So,
Are you finished, Mr. Fairman?
yeah, I am.
Okay. Is there any more discussion on the matter before we call for the vote? If there is none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed say no.
No.
There is a tie, so the mayor would vote. I vote to, in acceptance of Mr. Smith's motion, that we accept the bid that we are under consideration tonight. The motion would be carried.
Mr. Mayor, I'll make a motion, we adjourn.
There being no other business, we have a motion to adjourn. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, no. We stand adjourned.
Did somebody second the motion to adjourn? I'm sorry.
Sir?
Did somebody second the motion to adjourn? Okay.